from the studios of Clean Fuels Alliance America, this is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast. Authentic conversations with leaders in the biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel industries. Now, here's your host, Scott Tremaine.
And welcome. Today, Clean Fuels Technical Director Scott Fenwick discusses the role of the Engine Technology Forum and their support for internal combustion engines in policy, advocacy, and education with the Executive Director of the Engine Technology Forum, Alan Schaeffer.
Thanks, Scott. Alan, it's great to have you with us this week. Thanks for taking time to join us on our Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
Boy, it's great to be with you, Scott. Thanks for having us.
Really appreciate it. So we want to start off by talking about the Engine Technology Forum. Who is that? What do you do? What's your role in the industry?
Yes, well, that is the result of over a year's effort. Many of you know us as previously the Diesel Technology Forum, and somebody joked to me last year that you spent a whole year and all you did was just change one word of your name. From diesel to Engine Technology Forum. And yes, that is true. Now, put in that perspective, it gives me a whole new feeling about it. But we have been around since 2000 in the initial form of the Diesel Technology Forum, and really as a means to get out there and tell folks about the benefits and advantages of diesel technology. And in 2022, early 23, there started to be a sense that the discussion and the debate was changing. And I know that many of us have experienced this, that it used to be that we were really just talking and defending in many ways the continued use of diesel technology and all of the issues that surround that. And so we did a whole range of public opinion survey work and spoke to a lot of groups and outside folks about what they saw as the strengths of the organization and how things were changing in the policy world and what did we need to do to be successful in the future. And that really led us to the change that was made to take on a broader portfolio of discussion, and that is a broader defense and education about the continued importance of internal combustion engines. And so that means, everything from gasoline, natural gas, diesel, propane, any kind of internal combustion engine, and regardless of what kind of fuel it's using. And so the evolution took, about a year. It's kind of an interesting time because a number of us have gone through this, and you, Scott, and what used to be the National Biodiesel Board is now evolved, and in some ways we're sort of following your lead.
Well, like you said, having been with an organization that has gone through that rebranding effort from the National Biodiesel Board to Clean Fuels Alliance America, I can appreciate the pain, and everything that goes into those decisions. And it's not to be taken lightly, even though it seems to be, make jokes about it. It's just a one-word change. But it does better reflect, as you've mentioned, all of the work that you and your members are undertaking. It's not just about diesel. It is about the engine technologies and all of the fuels. And we'll come back to more about all of those different fuels. But in short, really, your organization then is all about support for internal combustion engines.
That's right. And I think, more than ever now, folks need to hear that message that this challenge of trying to decarbonize our world is so massive that there's really more than one solution. And there has to be, because there's so many diverse uses of technology. There's so many different kinds of demands from our economy. You really can't do this with just one kind of solution. And of course, I'm hinting towards electrification there, which has been identified by some as being the best solution. But really, we need a range of technologies and fuels and solutions. So being the Engine Technology Forum certainly gives us a bigger vantage point over that conversation and discussion. And I guess the other thing that sort of comes into this is that we sort of saw this debate evolving from, it used to be, diesel versus something else. And for a long time, it was diesel versus natural gas.
Yep.
And so we got very adept at understanding the different pros and cons of that discussion. And then more recently, the debate, I think, has evolved to, and I think the media has done this. The industry has not done this, but the media has done this. It's evolved to the combustion technology versus everything else, which principally is electrification. Some hydrogen fuel cell kind of things mingled in there as well. But it does give us a broader platform and a voice to speak with. Our membership did not change. And it's interesting representing companies that are going through this rapid change themselves because in addition to, sort of that bread and butter technology that's been fully driving, supporting the company and its financial growth and stability over the years, and that's diesel for most of these companies, or gasoline. Now they're, looking to make all these different investments in different fuels and technologies, and they're not really sure which ones are going to be the winner. So it's a very interesting time. And I think it's one that more insight, discussion, education is needed. And that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think at times the media and in some regards, the American public, they like that confrontation. There's got to be a good guy and a bad guy. But your members and those engine manufacturers, those vehicle manufacturers are producing still internal combustion engines, gasoline and diesel. They're producing natural gas engines. They're producing cleaner and cleaner engines, hydrogen fuel cells, and electric vehicles. And so it really is, as you mentioned, an all of the above approach.
It truly is. And one of the, I mentioned that our membership really did not change in terms of its makeup. And so we've always had kind of a mix of heavy duty engine manufacturers and equipment makers, the on-road trucking sector, heavy duty commercial vehicles, passenger car sector, suppliers, and more recently with folks in the fuel space, including petroleum fuels and of course the great renewable fuels that we know today, and appreciate the work and partnership that we've had with Clean Fuels Alliance America over the years. I think we have a very complementary message and efforts to try and advance the ball here. But our members are just you see this every day in the news that they're trying to announce new technologies and new things are coming, but at the end of the day, they also have some really good continued investments in internal combustion engines, and so that's the part of the story that we're trying to emphasize.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon it, and we look at it in the same manner. It is a complementary message. Obviously, Clean Fuels, we're associated on the fuel side. Engine Technology Forum, and your members are on the engine side, the hardware side of the equation. But your role really is kind of all encompassing. And so Engine Technology Forum, you and your staff are undertaking events in the marketplace, communications, and the press releases you're putting out. You're worried about policies and advocacy as well. Tell us more about some of the activities.
Yeah, well, this has been it's been an exciting year. I mean, we basically took everything we're doing on diesel, and we keep doing that. I should emphasize that diesel is still the predominant part of our portfolio of work and discussion every day. But we took all of that and then expanded in every area, to include the broader consideration of internal combustion. So we're now, sort of talking more positively, I guess, about natural gas, for example, and propane, new technologies to us, but not new, certainly in the marketplace. So we took on a very broad, change throughout the organization. So we have the new website, of course, has that sensibility to it. The whole new look and feel. The logo that we did has a kind of a droplet of fuel and a cog, a gear, sort of intermeshed together. And that sort of reflects, I think, how the industry is working to be part of that future, which is, it's not so much the engine that's the problem, so to speak. And I've heard people say this. It's really the fuel that's the issue, right? The fossil fuel that has the carbon in it. And if we can decarbonize that fuel, then we're doing something positive. And particularly if we're able to use renewable fuels that are mostly homegrown here in the U.S., even better. So that's been a big part of that. We have engaged in a lot of outreach events this year so far. We are delighted to be part of a big event in D.C. Just recently down on the National Mall, celebrating modern American agriculture with the equipment manufacturers. That was a great 2 days to be out there and surrounded by a lot of farm equipment and folks. And Clean Fuels Alliance was there right close to us, our exhibit. And we had the chance to talk to a lot of folks. So events are a big part of our thing. We're going to be speaking to state legislators later this year, folks in the industry, power generation conferences. So we're kind of covering the gamut on outreach, trying to build the brand, so to speak, and get out there a little bit more. We also had the need to do some big investments in research, and we're right in the thick of finishing up 4 major projects this year. Some major papers looking at this broader case for the internal combustion engine, sort of why it's still important and what it means in the future. We're looking at hydrogen as a fuel for internal combustion engines. We're trying to provide some new perspective about light duty vehicles, passenger vehicles, and internal combustion. And we'll be coming out soon with some data on the heavy duty truck sector and how many of those are of the newer generation technology. So research has been a big part of the first 6 months of this year, and we're going to continue on that, and we can talk about policy and other things as well.
Well, the research side of it is certainly one aspect that I appreciate in my role here at Clean Fuels, and all of the work that you're doing, again, for all of the fuels, all of the applications. And we should make note that your members are producing engines not just for over-the-road vehicles. It's off-road, ag construction equipment. It is power generation. And in some regards, it's really big engines that are used in locomotive and ocean-going marine applications. So this isn't just a small application of fuels and engines. This covers the entire gambit of transportation.
It's a big waterfront, isn't it? I mean, my goodness, when you start thinking about all the different economic sectors and marine and rail, just those two together, they're huge and in their impact in our economy. There are also some of the older engines that are out there in some cases and have greater opportunity for use of cleaner fuels that can start to bring some immediate kind of benefits. And that's sort of one level of discussion. And the highway truck sector is one that's, front and center, I think, every day for all of us, that there's so much change going on there and so much discussion about which fuels and technologies are going to prevail. And, we're in the messy middle of the heavy duty truck sector and what's going to happen next. And, the whole off-road sector, I think, is sort of an increasing focus for the future, because so much has happened in the on-road space and the light duty and heavy duty commercial truck side that, invariably some of the policy is going to shift towards some of the off-road sector. And that means, power generation and construction and farm equipment. So I expect those areas are going to have more activity in the coming years than they've had in the more recent time.
Well, let's come back to diesel fuel for just a moment. Still, I think in everyone's minds that isn't already involved in our industries, that diesel is dirty. It's almost synonymous out there. And so tell me about some of the work. I know what we're doing to promote clean diesel, but we've had some setbacks over the years. But tell me some of the things that Engine Technology Forum is out there and how you guys are promoting how clean the technology is today.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great topic. I think as part of our work to evolve to the Engine Technology Forum, one of the things we did was to look back in time, and what we saw from 2016 through 2022, I think was the ending point on that, was a more than doubling of a percentage of people that viewed diesel negatively. And it went from like 7.5% to like 16%. So it was a sizable jump and what had taken place during that time frame. And we're always trying to understand, sort of what that meant. And in large part, I think, the early part of, our work in history, as the Diesel Technology Forum previously,
Yep.
was really trying to educate folks about how diesel had gotten cleaner and how much cleaner, and over 90% reduction in emissions and across the board in every kind of diesel engine you can imagine since from 2000 to 2020, just in very general terms. And so that really gave us a little bit of an eye opener. Like, okay, this continues to be a really important part of our work because people obviously have taken on a different view about diesel. And we think some of that honestly is due to some of the shift in what the conversation has been more to climate change and greenhouse gas versus the criteria pollutants. Because today, for example, we know that, 60% or more of the heavy duty highway trucks that are operating are of the newest generation near zero emissions technology vehicles. So we know the industry has been getting more of the new product on the road and in the streets and the job sites. So the idea that things are getting better is we know that's happening at some level. To try and make sure people understand how clean diesel is, we've had all kinds of different ways to do that. We talk about the fact today that it would take more than 50 of today's trucks to equal the emissions from one truck that was built 20 years ago, and more than 25 of today's modern farm machines to equal the emissions of one that was built in 2010. So we try and come up with these little analogies and ways to help people visualize that, wow, these are really a lot cleaner. And honestly, back in the day when we had smoky smoke from diesel engines in city streets from buses and trucks was kind of a regular occurrence. Those days are pretty much behind us, fortunately. But we do have, the ongoing need to talk about how clean things are. And we have a campaign right now. I was just chatting with somebody from the EPA actually about it, which was we're trying to get out there and educate folks about the environmental stewardship of diesel products. And so we're talking about the importance of not tampering. That's been an issue that's come up in some sectors in the highway trucks and the pickup truck world, trying to get people to, behave responsibly with their engines and equipment and, good maintenance. Don't idle if you don't need to idle. And by all means, don't tamper with emissions control. So, by trying to project that positive environmental stewardship message out there, that's just another way to emphasize how clean things have become.
You're listening to the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
I'm Scott Fenwick, and today we're speaking with Alan Schaeffer, Executive Director for the Engine Technology Forum. So I think we've kind of brought our listeners up to the point where they're understanding who the Engine Technology Forum is after your rebranding efforts. But a lot of what you do, because our industries are so interrelated, can't really have an engine or a vehicle without having fuel for it. And the fuels aren't as good as, without the proper engine technologies, because transportation has what is helped grow our economy over the last 200 years. We wouldn't nearly be where we are today without these advancements in transportation. I think a lot of what people forget or maybe didn't even realize is that electric vehicles were around before the internal combustion engine. And we had electric vehicles across the country. Internal combustion engines and energy-dense fuels are what have allowed us to grow and expand our reach into a global economy that it is today. So tell me a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing in conjunction with the fuels industry as well.
Absolutely. I think, boy, it's quite an expansive world out there when you start talking about fuels today. I think, we have long recognized the importance of the renewable biofuel message in the context of diesel, particularly. I mean, Rudolph Diesel and the invention of the diesel engine, didn't start with, ultra low sulfur diesel. It started with, renewable biofuels, peanut oil and, other things. That's, kind of deeply rooted in the fabric of what diesel was and really is today. But the fuels message and story has gotten to be so important. Last year we did a white paper looking at the renewable diesel fuel opportunity here in the U.S. and the importance of that in decarbonizing the transportation sector, and really got some great response from that. We've also, tried to help folks understand that these fuels are, increasingly more available, and we can do so much more with them. And so we've really been trying to work hand in hand with Clean Fuels Alliance and follow your lead and some of your major members about, how can we add our 2 cents into this discussion with policymakers and others when we're visiting folks on Capitol Hill, when we're talking to state legislators later this summer. At their annual meeting, that'll be a major topic that we want to discuss, because I think people are starting to realize that we can and have such a great asset here in the U.S. with our biofuel industry, and we can just do more and more with that to help our existing vehicles. And, we don't need to make these changes to new vehicles and infrastructure, which are going to happen perhaps in some sectors at some day, but certainly aren't going to happen anytime soon in most sectors. So we've really tried to emphasize the fuel message. And, just a few weeks ago, we, sort of tried to speak out a little bit more strongly on that. We've long felt that the renewable fuels industry is taking a backseat to electrification here in the U.S. as a strategy to decarbonize the economy. And, it used to be, back in the day, I hate to say back in the day, but back in the day, we used to have technology neutral standards, right? EPA would set an emission standard, and really the most recent diesel standards was the first time they actually set fuel and engine standards together. So that was a milestone in and of itself. But anyway, we have long felt that renewable biofuels are not getting the deserved treatment that they need from our government. That we're, overly focused on one particular strategy and solution and investing heavily that area for policy, for electrification, for infrastructure, for vehicles, et cetera. And when we have such an opportunity here to grow and expand the use of these fuels, we need the policy that helps drive that, because if we're really serious about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, there's no better technology than an internal combustion engine using low carbon renewable fuels. And that is, I think pretty clear from some of the research that we've done. And it's been an important part of the last couple of years. And we want to make sure that folks are hearing that message each and every time we go out.
Well, I think back in the day just demonstrates how experienced you and I are. Not old, just experienced.
Okay, well, I agree with that, and let's not let the hair get into that discussion either. But I think we're on the same wavelength there as well.
We certainly are. So we've touched a little bit about all the technical work and the research and the advocacy and the communication. Let's jump into it. Let's talk policy. A lot of change occurs and a lot of advancements occur because of policy changes. And we've certainly seen our share of proposed and enacted policies here over the last couple of years. How does that impact your members and such? The proposed rules, some final rules from EPA in 2023 and now 2024, again, across the entire gambit that we've talked about, light duty, medium duty, heavy duty. How are these rules impacting that side of the business?
Boy, it's been a really aggressive time. I think it's the most aggressive regulatory calendar I've ever experienced in my 30 plus years of doing this, seeing so many major rules come out in such a short time frame. And I think, it's reflective of sort of the pent up drive from this administration and, sort of a reflection of need in some ways from others. But it has, I think, got a lot of people, really still trying to understand, really what these mean. And I think on the heavy duty side, we see a dramatic push towards zero emission vehicle technology, and manufacturers are aligned with that. They're fully, they're all in. They've said that they're trying to guide that in a direction that makes sense for them and what they think their product mix and their customers want in the future. And that is a major activity that's going to set the pace really between now and 2032. And the same thing goes on the light duty side, which is, really pushing hard for electric vehicles at the light duty space and even into some of the medium duty vehicle sector. And then there's California. We haven't said the C word yet. The California is is sort of the other elephant in the room here. But even taken together all of that, even if you factor in the advanced clean fleet rule and the advanced clean truck rule, yes, they're driving zero emission vehicle technology into the marketplace. No question about it. But at the end of the day, particularly if you look at the federal and California rules, you find that, as much as 60% or more could still be expected to be internal combustion engines in these out years of compliance. So I think it's, it sort of suggests that, yes, we're in a time of transition. This is the general direction that we're going, but we're not going to go there all at once. And there is still going to be a need and demand for internal combustion engines in the future. And I would say, fortunately, in each of the rules that there's a reflection that journey is going to be, less direct and clear than folks might have thought, that probably going to be some twists and turns in that road. And they've provided some flexibilities there for manufacturers to try and get to those zero emission vehicle targets that they have to meet. But again, internal combustion engines are still part of the mix at the end of the day when these rules are fully implemented, particularly in the larger vehicles. I mean, I think that that is going to hang with us for quite a long time until we see how and if a full energy transition to some other kind of fuel or technology takes place. But these rules are extremely consequential, and they're very very significant from a business perspective, and it's, companies are already very competitive. So this adds a new level of intensity to that. So we'll see how things work out. But as I, read the mountains of stories every day about, electrification and the challenges there and, zero emission vehicle announcements, et cetera, I'm often, just reminded that still today, the bread and butter, the majority of vehicles sold in the U.S. are internal combustion engines, and those are cleaner than ever. They're more fuel efficient than ever, and they're going to continue to provide, consumers and fleets and others, really good service, well into the future, and for who knows how long.
Yeah, I'm always amazed, working with nearly every engine manufacturer, certainly all of those with a diesel engine platform, amazed at the technology they develop and all of the advancements that they're making for clean burning technologies. I think you're right. I think that every time that there is new regulation, new technology that's introduced, they come at a cost, and they're not going to be perfect initially. But I have no doubts that your members and those engine manufacturers are going to figure this out, and that technology will get better over time. But I'm with you. What most people don't understand, especially when they just read the headlines, internal combustion engines to be banned by 2035, and certainly there are certain municipalities and areas that are looking at banning petroleum fuels. I think a lot of people think that this is going to be an instantaneous change here over the next decade. I know I don't see it. I don't think you see it because, as you mentioned, buried in these regulations, usually, page 220 of 600-page rule, they do acknowledge that for the next several decades, internal combustion engines are going to be around.
Boy, and it is so true. And I think a lot of that comes from just the world in which we live in, which is, the daily dose of media news, whether you're getting it from conventional news outlets or social media or whatever, is just, it's wide and deep every single day on these topics of change. And, I think that is really a major part of it. I think for the companies, they're trying to thread the needle here. This is by no means certain for them. So it's a high stakes, high cost, all the way around. So, I think what we are really trying to do, and I try and think about this every day, is to try and be a voice of of moderation, something in the middle, that, we're going to need all these technologies to advance our economy, our progress on climate change, et cetera, that there is not a single technology that's going to win. And at least in our lifetimes and what we can see, down the road, and that we ought to, embrace what we have and accept it, and not, get into petty fights with each other over it. And it's one of the biggest challenges, I think, for us. And I think about this one also every day, which is this politicization of electrification versus, the politics of this country, that, we're starting to have this big divide of, folks that are pro EV or anti EV. And, just state for the record clearly here that, our group is not anti EV. I'm not anti EV at all. I think there's going to be great places, and there already is great places for this technology. It's going to be a game changer for some. But for others, it may not work at all. And for some of these larger sectors and other users down the road, it's going to be, I think, a very tough sell economically and performance wise. And, so I think we try and approach every day as, let's try and be a voice of reason here, somewhere in the middle, that, embraces change for what change is. And that means that, the internal combustion engine is changing. It's getting more fuel efficient. It's using these cleaner fuels. And more of that we do now, the better off we'll be, 5, 10, 15 years from now. Because I've always, you sort of run into this, folks with lights flashing and sirens blaring, we're having a climate emergency that, every weather event is linked to climate change. And that may well be. And we've got a big garden in the yard here, and you can feel the change. So I'm with everybody on that. But things are not going to change overnight into, these new fuels and technologies, and just the economics of that alone is quite insurmountable in my humble opinion. But these, the technologies we have today, we need to keep them going and keep I think a steady hand at the tiller, so to speak. So we're able to make continued progress, getting on our journey, and not get caught up in these day-to-day kind of tit-for-tat things that are happening. And you mentioned bans on internal combustion, Scott, and that is one of the particular areas that is I think troubling, that you want to take really good options off the table before you're convinced that or proven that something new is as good or better that's going to replace it is available, affordable, and people will like it and actually buy it and use it. And, I think the politicians will say, well, we want to send a strong market signal. Okay. Let's let the market send that signal, right? If folks are ready to go for electrification, then they'll vote with their pocketbook. And, I'm sure that many will. And, but there's also going to be a contingent that is going to decide that's not the right way to go for me right now. So I want to do a little better. So maybe I'm going to go for a hybrid instead of something that's, maybe not good for my lifestyle or driving. So I think we have to embrace all these solutions. And, I think, we've got a strong future and opportunity ahead. It just, we just need to see it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on here. It's a little bit disingenuous, to read these headlines in the media about big oil versus big ag, in the original inception and commercialization of renewable fuels. And now it's internal combustion engines versus electric engines, zero emission vehicles. And I think you're right. We're advocating for an all of the above approach, whatever works for that particular consumer, that particular geography or season and application. There are going to be plenty of room for winners for everybody here.
Absolutely. And I wanted just to go back to one question you just raised a moment ago, which is, how I feel like the renewable fuels industry is not getting a fair treatment here. And, we've just sent a letter to the administrator about that and encouraging that, the next round of renewable volume obligations that are put out are put out in a timely way. And this time, are sensible and growth oriented, not ones that, sort of are a lackluster, low growth, no growth kind of kind of situation because, your industry and the clean fuels producers and that whole supply chain is expanding so rapidly and looking for opportunity with, the petroleum majors now starting to build refining capacity for renewable fuels and, having greater demands for that with some new low carbon fuel regulations coming into effect in New Mexico and a clean fuel standard being considered in New York. I mean, a lot of great things are happening and we just need, the right kind of government policy that helps pull all that together with the same kind of intensity that we have for the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the investments we've made in electrification. I think it's really going to be essential. And I think it's going to be a real litmus test for this administration about how they end up on that. Because if they don't come out with a growth-oriented fuels policy and later this year, I think there's going to be some pretty serious repercussions from that.
Well, we certainly appreciate the support from the Engine Technology Forum. We are so closely aligned and so closely integrated with your engine manufacturers, your members, and your message across the entire industry. It's been really important to be able to amplify the message from your members and to have the Engine Technology Forum help amplify our message both in Washington, D.C. and across state houses as well across the country.
Absolutely. And we love bumping into folks that are like-minded and talking about renewable fuels and everywhere we go. And we've seen that in just about every sector that we've worked in. And I've talked about trucking a lot and some of the off-road space, the construction, farm equipment. And we've recently spent a good amount of time talking about power generation and the role of backup generators, for example, in various applications. And we got involved in this initially in California 3-4 years ago when Public Service Commission out there started to and wanted as part of their planned safety power shutoff for wildfires. Communities were facing days and weeks without electric power, and how could you restore power to those places or make sure that they had the critical electricity they needed? Well, one of the great solutions was diesel generators can be spotted and brought in right away and hooked to the grid. And, in a matter of days or hours even, you can, be back up full line power and not have to worry. And some of the conditions for those generators going forward now have evolved to the use of HVO, or renewable diesel hydrogenated vegetable oil, as either standard requirement or as options for customers out there. And so we really tried to hammer that issue initially there in the last couple of years, and more recently we've been involved in some areas looking at the use of diesel generators as backups for data centers. And this is a huge issue in our part of the world here, and we're in just outside of Washington D.C. in suburban Maryland, and the Maryland-Virginia area is home to about 70% of the data centers in the entire United States. And I forget what the statistic is. I think it's over 80% of the internet traffic runs through Northern Virginia's massive array of data centers there. But, they all have the need for backup power, and their choice for backup power is the gold standard, which is a diesel generator. And more of them are finding that they can use those generators, but all the manufacturers have endorsed the use of 100% renewable diesel fuel in those units, and that's the way that we're going to continue to be able to use those engines in that application. And we've been involved in a local issue here where an initial applicant for a data center wanted to put in initially 168 diesel generators as part of a really huge campus that's going in as backup power, and had all kinds of issues. And the local utility commission here in Maryland rejected them, and we went down to Annapolis and testified in support of the governor's bill to streamline the Critical Infrastructure Act. So, at the end of the day, those we can still now have those generators are still an option for data centers here in Maryland. And I think that, we're going to see a lot of them want to take on sort of a greener use of those and start to request and specify the use of renewable fuels in those units. So we've seen this play out in right in our own backyard in some of these areas. So it's been quite interesting, but also I think very rewarding to go sit down with legislators and say, look, these are the gold standard for emergency backup power, and there's ways that we can make them cleaner. We can require them to be Tier 4 technology, the state of the art for off-road with the advanced emissions treatment. We can require them to use these high quality, renewable, low carbon fuels, that are good from emissions of all kinds, reduce greenhouse gas, et cetera. So it's been a great, very rewarding story. It's just, it's so evolving so fast that the data centers and the backup generators is something that every day you turn the page, there's a new setting, a new place, a new area that's having these same concerns. So it's just, start over again.
Well, I think you've outlined pretty well the tasks and the issues ahead of both of our industries. Alan, I really want to thank you for taking time to sit down with us today, to have this conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Scott, my pleasure, 100%. Really good to be with you, and keep up the great work at Clean Fuels Alliance America, and we'll be right there with you, hand in hand, waging the battle in the next trench.
Likewise. Thanks, Alan.
All right. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. If you enjoyed the show and you've got a moment, you can give us a rating. We do appreciate it. It does help us get up higher on all those lists. And if you really want to go for it, just leave us a review. We might just read it here. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've got a question for our experts or a suggestion for a future topic or guest, you can email us at podcasts@cleanfuels.org. And join us next week for another episode of the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
Thanks for listening. Better, Cleaner, Now is a production of Clean Fuels Alliance America. Follow us at cleanfuels.org and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Clean Fuels Alliance America, visit us at cleanfuels.org.